A month after Matt Eberflus was fired for his late game clock mismanagement, we watched interim head coach Thomas Brown do a very similar thing against the Seattle Seahawks. It's almost like the problems with this team go well above just who the head coach is.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we look back at a real ugly, boring Thursday night game, a defensive struggle between the Bears and Seahawks, where it feels like we're in reruns. Now we're with Bill Murray on Groundhog's Day, where the same things are happening to this team. Different head coach, different holiday, but still a Thursday and still a fourth quarter late game clock mismanagement. And while Thomas Brown definitely had overall more accountability than Matt Eberflus did, there's still a certain amount of defending the action that still feels wrong and still feels like lessons haven't been learned and feels like the problems are bigger than just who the head coach is there. We'll also get into some continued offensive problems, just 3 points in this game, 7 sacks of Caleb Williams, and himself, the rookie quarterback, not having a particularly great game. But on the other end, the defense held the Seahawks to only 6 points and found a little bit of a rejuvenation there. But I don't know that it's if it was just more than one flash in the pan here with only one game left against the Green Bay Packers. But the most infuriating part of all this, whether, pick your timeout or pick your clock run down in the end of the 2 minutes, like any of the individual things, frustrating, annoying, etc. But it is the repeat of fourth quarter clock mismanagement that stings the most, right? It's not just that you botched it at the end of this game and burned more time off the clock and wasted timeouts when perhaps those could have come in handy, but it's the fact that you did it in so many of the similar ways, right? When it's a decision on fourth down, where first they get fourth and short, then they get a false start on the backup left guard, Jake Curhan, which is pull your hair out, maddening. Then, okay, you back up 5 yards, punt team comes out, call timeout, offense goes back out, converts it, but why did you send the punt team out and then have to call timeout? If we saw the Bears do the same thing with trying to do that in the Lions game, and that gets Matt Eberflus fired. Thomas Brown does the exact same thing. And of course, Thomas Brown is asked about it after the game, like, dude, like, what was the confusion there? And he said, and I quote, "It wasn't any confusion at all. I just changed my mind." He went on to say that, he wanted to kind of rely on the defense and the punter there. They had the 2-minute warning and multiple timeouts to say, hey, defense, go make a stop, we'll get the ball back, etc. And then turns around and changes his mind and said, you know what, like, let's keep the ball in our offense's hand. Let's stay aggressive. What do we really have to lose here? And I mean, it's worth noting that going for it in that situation ended up being the right call in the sense that, like, he got to the right decision eventually, but it shouldn't take a timeout and a changing of the mind to get to the right decision here. And that's the thing. Like, how are you as a coach not certain when you go out there? And why is it that the punt team gets all the way out there and you call a timeout, before the mind is really changed, right? I mean, I'm sure the mind is changed and then he calls timeout, like, as far as the order of operations, but like, why is there even any changing of the mind? Like, on the third down play before that, he should have already known, okay, depending on how many yards we get here, that will determine whether or not I'm going to go for it on this fourth down situation. It was 3rd and 2, and Caleb Williams ended up kind of running up the middle and getting tackled for a yard. It left him with 4th and 1. So on 4th and 1, they were ready to go for it, and he should know in the back of his head, like, if we get backed up, are we going to go for it or not? Like, you want your head coach to always be 2 steps ahead, to always have an idea of what my next play call is going to be, what my next scenario is going to be. And he should know, and he should be able to be decisive and, confident in that decision, but there's another word for that. Ryan Pace used to use it all the time when they conviction. He should have conviction. That's the word I was looking for. He should be able to have conviction on that and not say, not change his mind halfway through putting the punt team out there and then getting the offense back out there again. I'm glad he ended up going for it and making the right decision there, but you burn a timeout before the 2-minute warning there in a situation where it was completely unnecessary to do so. Because then, you get a few plays later under the 2-minute warning and a bunch of time comes off the clock. He gets the big completion to Roma Dunze on 3rd and 14, somehow finding a way to complete that for 15 yards in a really tight window. But then more than 30 seconds come off the clock before the next snap. And Caleb Williams said after the game that on that play, he got hit in the throat after the throw, hit in the upper head area and then direct contact to the throat. So he was like slow to get up. The Bears were trying to no huddle, but he was slow to get up, get the play call in, and then get everything because he had all this extra contact that should have been penalized in this game. But again, like, that's a situation where, man, if you hadn't burned that timeout right before the 2-minute warning, could you have used one there when you see your quarterback on the ground? I mean, should the sideline have seen? I mean, we don't know how well they knew he got hit in the throat. I mean, there's a lot of different questions swirling around this, but it's more time wasting on the clock when it is certainly of the essence there as the offense is trying to get going. Your quarterback just made a great play, and then you really stall out from there. And all of this, Thomas Brown reveals that, hey, we were trying to get into field goal range. It felt like between the 34 and the 37-yard line. They had it at the 40 with 1st and 10 there at the end. And they again make it pretty clear throughout Thomas Brown's comments that the Bears were playing for the field goal. They weren't trying to get to the end zone there. I mean, sure, if they get to the end zone, that's great, but they were really focused more on trying to get the field goal, playing to tie and send it into overtime, as opposed to playing to win. And like all of these things we're talking about, the playing to tie, the too much time taking off the clock, the using timeouts when you really don't need them because the clock is stopped after an incomplete pass and they still end up using a timeout to talk a play over. Like, those are the kind of things that were issues under Matt Eberflus that Thomas Brown was supposed to solve and didn't. And it sure signals to me that there's bigger issues here than just the person on the headset making the decisions, right? But it's the coaches in the booth upstairs communicating with that head coach. It's the staff that works on clock management during the week and prepares those types of situations. It's people having their eyes in the right situation, or the right places in the right times in the right situations, and trying to stay a step ahead. They just aren't on top of everything the way they need to, and it's really permeates throughout the coaching staff. And I mean, because it's still Matt Eberflus's coaching staff, even though he's not at the head of it anymore. It's all guys that are still sort of continuing what he started for them, and that means continuing a lot of the same mistakes as well. And that was very evident on offense, where the Bears' inability to adapt to the Seahawks' blitzes in this game, when blitzes have been really a go-to defensive game plan for Bears opponents all season, is really frustrating of, again, doing the same things and making the same mistakes here. So we'll kind of look at where the offensive problems are here and where some of the blame definitely belongs on Caleb Williams, and some of it belongs on the rest of the Bears offense, the coaching staff, and the receivers for not being able to do more for their quarterback here. And then we'll also touch on the defense holding Seattle to just 6 points next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I have the Gametime app on my phone, and I use it all the time. It's my go-to app for getting tickets to concerts, comedy shows, sports. I go to NBA games. I've gone to Bears games on Gametime app. I love the Gametime app ticket buying experience, because with Gametime, you can see the view from the seat you're going to purchase before you buy your ticket, so you know exactly what you're going to get with your ticket purchase, a panoramic seat view ahead of time. And you can turn on all-in pricing that puts all the fees and everything else up front, so you know you know exactly how much you're going to pay for when you go through the ticket buying process. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're seeing this Bears offense spin its tires in the mud, or I guess probably in the snow now is probably the more apt metaphor here, where it's the same type of mistakes cropping up over and over again, and their inability to adjust and adapt to those is getting old fast. I mean, we talk a lot about same old Bears. It's same old Bears offense this season. I mean, you could almost script out ahead of time how the game is going to go for the Bears on offense, right? Okay, you're going to come out of the gate in the first quarter, first drive of the game, almost certainly a 3-and-out. Lo and behold, it wasn't in this drive. Maybe the second drive, they'll get like a first down and then 3-and-out from there, but, never really cross midfield. Then they'll go 3-and-out a couple more times into the second quarter or whatever it might be. And then, mid-ish second quarter, they'll remember randomly, after 20-plus minutes of the football game, of game time, they'll remember randomly that, hey, you know what? When we go no huddle, Caleb Williams really gets into the rhythm. Maybe we should stick to the running game a little bit more and then go up tempo a little bit more. Lo and behold, midway through the second quarter, Bears start going up tempo again. Remember that they do that and that Caleb Williams is effective in that. They start sticking to the running game a little bit more. And they have their best drive of the game from their own 9. They drive down, deep into Seahawks territory. A touchdown's taken off the board by a penalty. They still get a field goal, and it's their first points of the game. And it's like, oh, wow. It's always that way for the Bears, right? Start slow, 3-and-outs. Right before the half, they get some tempo and some rhythm going. And you're like, okay, maybe the offense can start to do something. But then third quarter, they'll come out flat. You'll get a bunch of 3-and-outs and 5-and-outs in the third quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, the Bears will show a little bit more life and ultimately come up short at the end. Like, that was the formula in this game. That felt like the formula in the first Vikings game and some of the second Vikings game and maybe the first Lions game. I mean, over and over and over again, the Washington game, it's like the same thing from this Bears offense. And it's like, how many more times do you have to see your team operate in the same way and follow the same kind of script where it's like they forget every time? It's like watching a TV show, where like Seinfeld or Friends or whatever, where it's like at the Office, where at the beginning of the next episode, seemingly everything that happened in the previous episode has just never happened. Maybe cartoons are a better example there. Like Family Guy, where like something crazy happens in Family, somebody dies or whatever in the episode, and then the next episode everything's fine, and whatever happened last episode doesn't actually exist in the continuation of the story, right? Like that's how it feels for the Bears. It's just like, oh yeah, wait a minute, they forget every week that going up tempo is a good idea, and they never start it until like mid-second quarter, and then they don't stick to the running game until like mid-second quarter. They forget that, hey, this stuff all kind of works well, or not works well, but works better than everything else that doesn't work for this offense. Like, and then in a similar vein, like we've seen pretty much all season dating back to like the Washington Commanders game. The Commanders were the first team that figured out like, hey, wait a minute, it dates back a little bit, like the Texans and the Colts did this a little bit too, but like the trend started in the Washington game where they're like, hey, if we just blitz this Bears offensive line a lot, Caleb Williams is going to take too many sacks. He's going to hold on to the ball and not get rid of it and take a couple sacks. And this offensive line that's injured is going to have trouble picking up these blitzes. So let's just blitz them and make them consistently beat our blitz. And with Washington, the Bears couldn't consistently do it. And the Bears haven't won a game since. I mean, the Patriots blitzed them a little bit more than normal. The Cardinals blitzed them a little bit more than normal, of course. The Vikings blitzed the crap out of them. And then the Seahawks come in this game and become another aggressive blitzing defense here. A lot of cover zero. And Caleb Williams ends up getting sacked 7 times. And so many times, those were the plays that disrupted Bears drives, where maybe they get a little bit ahead of the sticks and then they lose 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards on another sack. And then it's 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14. And, you figure it out from there. And I think it's important that we keep in mind that Caleb Williams definitely deserves his share of the blame on these sacks. I don't know that it's always the fact that he's quote unquote holding onto the ball too long. Some of these sacks are fairly early in the play. From snap to the time that the sack is actually made. It's not like these are all happening 7, 8, 9 seconds into the play. Some of them are more like 3 or 4 seconds in the play, which is quick. But I think the way to think about this is that Caleb Williams cannot control how quickly the offensive line in front of him is beaten by the pass rush. He can't necessarily control how well they pick up the blitz. He can change the protection and try and put them in position to pick up the blitz, but like that's where his time ends. Like the pressure caused by the defense is outside of Caleb Williams' control. What Caleb Williams has control over is, okay, they're pressuring you. Are you going to throw the ball somewhere, or are you still going to have the ball when they tackle you to the ground? That's what Caleb Williams has control over. The difference between throwing it away and taking a sack. That's the main thing. If those 7 sacks are 7 incomplete passes instead, it hurts his completion percentage more and makes the stat lines, even a little bit worse there. But they're 0-yard plays instead of negative yard plays. And that's ultimately better for this Bears offense. To Caleb's credit, sometimes he does escape those sacks and makes big plays, and it's really important. I mean, think about the 4th and 5 play that they converted late in the fourth quarter there when there's a blitz coming. It was after the false start, and then they blitzed him, and he immediately had to take off, flush out of the pocket, and throws it downfield a little ways to DJ Moore and converts the first down. If you're telling Caleb, hey, when they blitz, instead of taking the sack, throw it away. I mean, he's smart enough to know not to throw it away on 4th and 5. But you know what I mean? Like there are plays like that where he escapes and either scrambles for a positive gain or escapes and finds a way to get to an open receiver, or escapes and then still throws it away, but at least gave receivers more time on plays to get open. Caleb himself after this game admitted, yeah, I took too many stupid sacks in this game. I think he used the word stupid. Dumb or stupid. He used an insult like that, referring to himself for taking those sacks. So he gets it, right, and he agrees with this. But it was a big problem for this Bears offense. But even beyond that, yes, he's taking these sacks, but also, like, can you give him an option against the blitz? Like, Thomas Brown was asked at the end, like, hey, what were you, why didn't you try and run the ball in some of those late game situations to get a little closer for the field goal? It's like, well, the defense was in cover 0 and we just don't really have a lot of options to move the ball against the cover 0. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're saying you as an offensive coordinator, like you don't have answers for like a fairly normal thing that defenses can do. I mean, you don't expect them to blitz this frequently, but like every defense is going to blitz you sometimes, and you just don't have answers. Like, you know what I mean? Like you played the Vikings twice. You should have every blitz answer in the book ready at your fingertips from all the blitzing you've had to be prepared for over the last month. And it just felt like throughout this game, the Seahawks blitzes disrupted so much what the Bears wanted to do on offense, and they never had a proper response. I mean, they just kept throwing wide receiver screen passes, and that worked a little bit, but then they were batting them down the line of scrimmage and making tackles for loss in the backfield, and just like that seemed like their only real answer there, except for maybe like a read option play once or twice, but like they just really couldn't find anything to respond to that, and that also to me feels like it reflects very poorly on the coaching staff. So yeah, Caleb Williams didn't play particularly well, and he took too many sacks, but man, they're not giving him many other options. They're not helping him the way that they should, and it's the same mistakes and the same defense. Are just doing the same thing against them, and they still can't figure out any way to do anything differently. And I fully expect if the Green Bay Packers know what they're doing defensively, they're going to blitz the Bears too. And Thomas Brown, is he still not going to have any answers for it then either? Like, this is your job. Be ready for what they're going to call and then have answers for what they're going to call. And it felt like the Bears weren't able to do either on offense. At least the defense got back to playing something that looked like quality Chicago Bears defense. But how much of that was just a bad game by the Seahawks offense in there as well versus the defense actually finding some of its groove back? We'll take a look at where some guys fall on each side of that category next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses that are a great way to continue your education or just scratch that curious itch. If you're a lifelong learner, it's a great way to take advantage of their free offerings. They got a bunch of cool courses available. Some history courses like the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. They've got economics courses, classical music course, chemistry, math, even a brand new documentary style courses in there, all for free. And all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever you want and tune in wherever you're located. And then if you want, you can go deeper with readings and quizzes and discussions, or you can simply just sit back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This Bears defense held the Seahawks to 6 points. In every NFL world we've ever lived in, if you hold the other team to 6 points, you should almost always win that game. I'm surprised I never saw like an ESPN, stats and info of like how many teams have lost, what a team's record is when they hold the opponent to 6 points, or vice versa. Like, what is the team's record when you only score 6 points? How often do you win that game? Very, 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 very rarely. And so I've been particularly critical of this Bears defense over the last handful of weeks. I think they've been particularly bad over the last handful of weeks. Came to play a bit more against the Seahawks. I don't know if it's being back at home, if it's prime time, Thursday night football, or if they got the right amount of, their butts being chewed out after playing so poorly the last couple of weeks. Whatever it was, Eric Washington got better play out of this defense than we'd seen for quite some weeks. And it was nice to see not just better play, but like better energy and better juice from guys. Like DeMarcus Walker clearly really still cares and is playing hard and getting in guys' faces and wanting to disrupt and wanting to cause problems. Like, that's fun to see. Darrell Taylor, revenge game against the Seahawks, gets, I think, a strip sack on Geno Smith. I think it was him who got the forced fumble on that one play. He definitely got a sack. I don't remember if that was the strip sack play or not. Montez Sweat got a strip sack in this game. Byron Cowart brought down the quarterback as well. Like, these guys were getting after it up front and breathing some new life into that group. And the turnovers helped breathe some new life into the whole defense. Well, I guess they only got one actual turnover, but at least they got the ball loose multiple times in this game. And that felt really, really cool. Even Tyreek Stevenson, like for someone who's been so heavily criticized, rightfully so, and in the spotlight under the microscope, he did a really good job of at least getting under DK Metcalf's skin and drawing penalties from DK Metcalf. Like, that was, usually Stevenson's the one who ends up on the penalty side of that, but like, use that to your advantage. Okay, like if you can get under guys' skins, as long as you don't get caught with the yellow flag, go for it. Like, that shows that you care, right? That you're not just going to let DK Metcalf push you around because you're 4-12 at this point. Like, no, you still have some personal pride and you got to go out there and beat the opponent across from you. Because like, even Kirk Herbstreit during this game commented on, during the broadcast, players on the Bears not running very hard on defense. There was a play where Geno Smith scrambled, and Kirk Herbstreit's like, yeah, it's weird seeing players in this Bears defense not really getting off their horse and running after him here. And he mentioned linebacker in particular, where you see the replay, Tremaine Edmonds maybe jogging quite a bit at the end of that play. Again, like there's certain guys in this Bears defense, throw Kevin Byard in this mix as well, that just like aren't playing as hard as some of the rest of their teammates. And it's a shame, and it should be embarrassing for them on tape to watch it in the film room and say, hey, what's going on with the effort here, bud? Like, if I'm his coach, I'm getting on him for that. And again, I like to give people benefit of the doubt, human beings in general, let alone football players. Maybe those guys are dealing with nagging injuries that aren't on the injury report, but are slowing them down and limiting their ability to play through pain and hustle fully on these plays. Or maybe they're checking out a little bit and cashing a paycheck and just trying to get to the end of the year without getting hurt. Either way, it's nice to see the players that did come up and play well. I mentioned the pass rush there. It's worth noting, though, like the Seahawks offensive line is bad. We talked to Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks on Wednesday's podcast, and he told us about, yes, this offensive line is really bad and is kind of the big Achilles heel for the Seahawks offense. So I don't want that to take everything away from this Bears defensive line, but I think that's part of the difference, why the pass rush had been pretty non-existent the last couple weeks against a really good Lions offensive line and a good Vikings offensive line. And all of a sudden they come on this game. Why is it? Well, worse offensive line helps in that. Guys also played with better effort and just better technique in this game, But nonetheless, you'll take these small victories, and you can't even call those victories, right? But you can take these small silver linings wherever you can. And I think it's worth pointing out here for contrast that, like, both of these offensive lines are bad. But the Bears' offensive line gave up 7 sacks, and the Seahawks' offensive line gave up 3 sacks. And the difference there, to me, feels like it's the quarterbacking, right? Like, that's Geno Smith getting rid of the ball to not take more sacks, and Caleb Williams not getting rid of the ball and ended up taking more sacks. And then you can also throw on here that the defense did a really good job of staying on top of some of the deeper stuff. I think Geno hit DK Metcalf on one deep bomb that I can remember. But for the most part, the Seahawks had to throw short and underneath a lot and kind of dink and dunk their way downfield. I mean, it's why I was going to do the quick math on Geno Smith's yards per attempt in this game was under 7. I think he had 160 yards on 23 attempts in this game. Like, things ended up being a bit shorter for them overall. They were getting more yards after the catch, and the Bears weren't always hustling, and that was some of the things we were talking about. And then, tackling is still something that kind of comes and goes for this team, but still, you held them to 6 points. That's doing your job, mission accomplished on defense. Your offense literally just needs to score the equivalent of 1 touchdown, and you win the game. And all you got was 1 field goal, barely. That should have been a touchdown from a couple plays before it, and then playing for a field goal at the end to try and tie a 6-6 game instead of going for the win is just, it's the same old Bears. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same team making the same mistakes and not learning lessons from the mistakes they made earlier in the season. And man, it just sometimes feels like the end of the actual regular season can't get here soon enough because, yeah, I mean, you got one more game against the Packers, and hopefully they can get fired up for that and step up to play for that one and play them tight and close, and maybe even sneak one more win late this season. I mean, might as well go for it here. But beyond that, we can finally then turn our attention more deliberately to the head coaching search, and we'll do some deep dives on Ben Johnson, on Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and try and get a sense of like some of the different candidates the Bears are going to be looking at here. But it just goes to show you that even when the regular season ends, we don't go anywhere here on the Locked On Bears podcast. We'll still be coming to you 5 days a week, each and every day, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of that daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. I hope you had a very enjoyable holiday with your family, no matter what you're celebrating this time of year. Hopefully you got a little bit of time off work and got to sort of appreciate the important people in your life, whoever that is, whether they're, blood family or just the family you choose, your friends and all that. I hope you got to spend time with loved ones this time of year. And I hope that a boring 6-3 Bears game didn't ruin your holiday spirit too much. But hey, enjoy the weekend off. We'll be back next week. We may end up taking a New Year's Day off at some point next week as well to celebrate the turn of the new year. But hey, you know what? Either way, we'll still make sure to find time for you to bear down.